Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Long Distance Lounge. My name is Tim Sweeney, and on this episode, we're going out there to the Outback. Specifically, we're going to the Northern Territory, or as they call it, the Territory in Australia. And we're going to talk to a guy named David McMahon, who, man, this guy has some stories, and he knows how to tell a story. David works for a company called Venture North Safaris, which specializes in high-end tours. They take people all across the top end and the Northern Territory of Australia, including way out into Arnhem Land, which is a place well beyond where I actually visited. These are wild places. His life involves, encounters with crocodiles, snakes, you name it. And we're going to get into all of that with him. And yes, he can tell a story. I went to the Northern Territory, myself. I wrote about it in my book. That book is called Yank Down Under, A Drink and a Look Around Australia. You can find it on Amazon. Yep, had to get that plug in there. My trip to Darwin and the Northern Territory was really something else. It's a very, very unique place. This is like the last frontier a bit of Australia. Darwin is a frontier town, and that is how you access these places that you probably saw in Crocodile Dundee. And David kind of lives that life in a way, and we joke about that in the podcast. But it's a very special place. I think you're going to love David's stories, and so I won't keep yammering on here, and I'll let you hear from him. Let's get into it. This is David McMahon coming to you from the Northern Territory of Australia. Welcome, David. Thank you so much for joining me. I have been waiting to talk to you. I'm really excited about this because I think you're living, I guess, a life in existence, a job, let's say, a career, I suppose, that few people do. A lot of people would think it's eccentric, and to people in other parts of the world, they can't even put their minds around this. So first, where are you calling in from today? And can you just give us your title, what you do for a living?
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here. So I'm tour guide in Arnhem Land. I'm in Darwin at the moment, the capital of the Northern Territory.
Yep.
And that's where I'm sort of based, but most of my time is out in the most remote pockets of Northern Australia, really, really wild places where we take small guests, pick them up in Darwin and get them right out in the bush. We have a lot of access through really remote Aboriginal country. We need permits to be there.
Yep.
And we work closely with traditional owners to take small groups of interesting guests into this wild part of Northern Australia.
Yeah, so tour guide is kind of putting it... That when people think of tour guide, you could be at Disney World or something, but this is really remote places you go to. I mean, I guess we can start with the Northern Territory or territory, as you say down there, I guess. The Territory.
The Territory, yeah.
Is a massive, massive place, right? And there's only, several 100,000 people that live in this overall in the Territory. I forget, there's all kinds of stats, right? It's like six times
twice the
bigger
size
than
of
the
Texas.
UK. Twice the size of
Yeah,
Texas.
twice the size of Texas, and we've got just over 200,000 people. So
Wow.
most of those are in Darwin.
Yep. Okay. So
About
Darwin's
120-something thousand, yeah.
Oh, really? Okay. So Darwin's kind of I'd say, for a tourist, for a visitor, kind of the jumping off point to see the rest or other parts of the territory. Like there's a proper city there, or town, city, if you will.
Yeah,
which
it's
has
a lovely small city.
Yeah, a lot of cool history, actually, too, which I didn't realize until I went there. And when you fly in to Darwin, I was coming from Melbourne, it's red, dry, and then a lot of wetlands. So the contrast was quite fascinating from above. Can you kind of set the stage for what is up there in the top end, as they call it?
So, yeah, the top end, the Northern Territory split into the top end and the desert country. And Central Australia in the desert, you've got Uluru. Alice Springs is the capital of the desert, and it's really dry, surrounded by all these really, really dry deserts. But as you head north, you're going thousands of kilometres further north, you're well and truly up in the tropics. So Darwin gets that wet season, dry season tropics, enormous amounts of rain in the wet, and that creates these endless floodplains and wetlands and really spectacular stuff.
Yeah, it's quite a contrast, isn't it, from the dry center, if you will. And then when you get to the top end, it's like right this winter, what is winter in the north and summer for you guys is serious wet season. I mean, the changes in the season are drastic, right?
I mean, yeah, Southern Australia, they talk about summer, autumn, winter, spring, like everywhere. Northern Australia, we don't have any of that. We have the wet season and the dry season. And for Aboriginal people, it's even more sophisticated. Larrakia people, the Aboriginal mob in Darwin, they have 7 different seasons, so they break it up even further. But
Okay.
there's certainly no winter, that's for sure. And it's never
Yeah, it's
cold.
always toasty. I guess let's start with your background too, because how do you get into this? If I look at your social media, your Instagram, it's incredible the stuff you're showing, and you're really authentic. It's like you know a ton about what you do. It's clear. How did you, I guess, gain all the knowledge? What's the background to do this? Did you always want to do this, and where did you even grow up?
Well, it's a bizarre background to get into this sort of lifestyle. I grew up in the south of Australia, in Adelaide,
Okay.
a place called the Fleurieu Peninsula. If anyone knows of Kangaroo Island, that's a really
Yep.
well-known tourist island on the south, not far from there. And every spare second I ever had growing up, I was in the bush. But my path led me down the idea of chefing. And I jumped in after school and did an apprenticeship, worked in super flash fine dining restaurants in the south, a
Okay.
world away from what I'm doing now. And
Yeah.
and back then, every spare second I had, I'd be in the bush. But my day job was in kitchens doing this really hectic paced lifestyle. And I took a break from that after finishing that apprenticeship, bought a 4-wheel drive, head up the guts, right up the centre of Australia, 3,000 kilometres from the south to the north,
Yeah.
and drove into a place called Arnhem Land, which is 100,000 square kilometres of Aboriginal-owned land. And my auntie was a nurse. She's nursing in this really tiny remote Aboriginal community, 800 people in the back of beyond. And my
Okay.
uncle's running a boat for a tourism company.
Oh,
So I
see.
spent a bit of time in the community, got to know locals, got to learn a bit of Binning, Goonwap, Binning language, and then spent a bit of time in this tourist camp and realised, hang on, this is a job. You can do this as a job,
Right.
you know, rather than spending all your spare time in the bush. This could be me permanently.
Right.
And I'd grown up as a budding naturalist, you know. Always, every time I walked past something, I wanted to know what it is, why it was there. So I had this reasonable base level of knowledge, and I had that
Yep.
organisation skills from chefing. They hired me on the spot. That was 16 years ago.
Okay.
And I spent the next 16 years in a one-off apprenticeship. There's no other way to describe it. Living and working with Aboriginal people, downloading this vast 65,000 years of knowledge. It's there's no better people to learn the bush from. So I've been extremely fortunate, privilege of a lifetime.
Are you working for different guide groups along the way, and like who are you working for now? Are you moving around? How's that all work to build that career?
Yeah, well, I was pretty fortunate. The tourism company my uncle was working for is a mob called Venture North Safaris, and 16 years on now, I'm still their head guide. Just an extraordinary small business that takes really small groups, so maximum 6 people,
Okay.
and their cultural nature-based tours with unparalleled access into the most remote parts of Northern Australia. So it was a huge change for me to try to learn that bush. And, you know, growing up, always been passionate and interested in things like crocodiles and snakes, but there's no crocodiles in the south. All of a sudden, I'm surrounded by crocodiles, and
Yeah.
it's pretty much a sink or swim sort of thing.
Yep.
You learn quick.
Yeah, I want to get into all that stuff. The thing that I experienced there, I did a tour. I went to Darwin. I did Litchfield, another park nearby. I wrote about that in my book, which was a funny day because it was me and a bunch of retirees. I was worried people were gonna drop dead because it was toasty. We did some swimming and some of the swimming holes, I guess you'd say. It was a spectacular experience. The next day, I went out to Kakadu, which was a smaller group tour, a lot of younger people. I mentioned to you before we started recording here that the guide really took us beyond where most people. He had a 4-wheel drive vehicle, which is cool. You did the yellow water billabong, so you cruise, you see the crocodiles, and then some hiking. How do you get access? Because you're going well beyond that. Like Arnhem Land, you need permits, etc. So I guess we should first explain. From Darwin, you have various national parks you can access within a couple of hours. Kakadu's a huge place. A lot of tour groups go there, but there's still Aboriginal communities living out there, and it's a different way of living. Arnhem Land is beyond that even, right? Can you kind of set the landscape for us of what, when you look at a map, how far afield are we talking?
Yeah, so Darwin sits right in the centre of Australia, but way up north. And when you head out to the east of there, couple of hours drive, you get into Kakadu National Park. And a national park like Kakadu, it's kind of hard to put into words how big, but I know Yellowstone National Park is 9,000 square kilometres. Kakadu National Park is just over 20,000 square kilometres.
Jeez.
So it's big
Okay, huge.
on another scale. It's an enormous park in itself, extremely remote. As you mentioned, Aboriginal people still living in the park. It's all Aboriginal owned land. But if you go further again, so another couple of hours drive, you cross this wild river called the East Alligator River. Funny story, there's no alligators in the East Alligator,
Right.
but that's another yarn.
Yep.
And that's the western border of Kakadu and Arnhem Land. And when you get out into Arnhem Land, it's like going back in time. Aboriginal people have been able to maintain that cultural knowledge and that connection with country. So you've got these scattered communities, Aboriginal communities, and then outside of that, you've got Aboriginal people living on what's called homelands, these really small, like maybe 2 or 3 little houses in the bush.
Okay.
All the Aboriginal languages of Arnhem Land, they're all still spoken, and we're talking a huge diversity of language. It's a wild place, really, really wild.
What I really found fascinating was the way people talk, even in all of the Northern Territory, about things being like just down the road. I was in a pub in Darwin, as you do, I think, frequently.
Thirsty
there.
place.
Yeah, exactly. It was at the time. I was probably too thirsty again there. And I remember someone saying, I just struck up a conversation with someone, and the guy was like, "Yeah, I'm from just down the road in Alice Springs." And then I was like, just down the road, looking on the map. It's like a day or two, right? I mean, it's not just down the road, but people talk like everything's nearby.
Distance is relative. I mean, yeah, when you're living in these places where it's just a normal day to drive 2 or 3 hours at speed to get to a spot for whatever reason. Yeah, distance becomes a different thing, and what's down the road to us is 2 days drive to someone else. It's a long road, but it is literally one road. So
yeah. That's the road you took to change your life, I guess, right? The straight up the guts, as you say.
The Stewart Highway, right up north.
When I guess it'd be nice to explain to people who haven't visited Australia or just watch movies, and I don't want to name the movie that everybody watched in America that you know what I'm talking about, and Aussies will get mad at me if I mention his name, the fictional character, right?
Hey, Crocodile Dundee. If that's
it's okay if you
30
say
years and we're still milking it. It's fantastic. I mean, really, that has done wonders for the Northern Territory. Every Australian loves Paul Hogan, so
That's true.
You can't go wrong with Crocodile Dundee. It's a classic film.
Do you get like not comparisons, but people aren't watching this or they're listening. You got the beard, the cap. Right? If they visit your Instagram, you live a bit that life. I don't want to patronize what you do because that's fiction. You're doing the real thing, taking people out there. But people must give you a little bit of gruff for that sort of lifestyle, do they?
Yeah, well, I suppose. I mean, you watch that film. You've got this guy taking a journalist out. And I think, I do that all the time. That really is my life.
Right.
And just as wild with the crocodiles, and those experiences as fictionalized in that movie and made fun of or whatever. It's a very funny film, but I think, Jesus, I could make a movie pretty similar about things that have actually happened to me. So
right, real life,
not
real
far
life
from the
stuff.
truth.
Yeah.
It's a wild place.
So in Kakadu, where I was, and even when I went to the swimming holes in Litchfield, this blows people's mind who've never been there, but they said, it's safe to swim now. The whole swimming hole's been cleared of crocodiles. Everything's fine. How does that all work? Because from times of year, you can't go near swimming holes. You definitely don't swim at the beaches in Darwin and the Northern Territory. Like, this is a different world, the Northern Territory, from other parts of Australia.
Yeah, it's a wild place. By the 1970s, we'd almost shut crocodiles out. We protected them. Now there's more crocodiles than people. And that's the way we want it. We live in a wild place where nature rules. So they've got their natural diversity, their natural numbers in the bush. The places we can swim in the wet season, everything floods. So crocodiles can get anywhere. It's just off limits. Crocodiles can be in any bit of water. It has happened in the past that people have found crocodiles in their backyard swimming pool. That's not a normal story, but it happens. And then once the water drops, those crocodiles are trapped in these water holes. Most of them we just leave alone. That's where they live. But there's a few designated swimming holes where we say, okay, this is set aside for people. And the crocodile management teams, they get in there, they put these huge traps in. Usually they bait with pig heads. we got a huge feral pig problem. So the rangers go out, bang off a few pigs.
Okay.
They bait with the pig's head, and it takes over 30 nights consecutive of scanning the water for those red eyes. The trap's out. You've got big floating buoys as well. We say buoys, but buoy or whatever you call them, those floating, and that's stuffed with fish oil. Crocodiles have to chomp them. They can't help themselves. And it's these consecutive nights to make sure if there are any crocs in, they're caught and removed. And then you need to go back to that 30-something consecutive nights of no crocodiles. So they don't mess around. By the time they say, yep, this is safe to swim, it sounds like it's a pretty wild, you're juggling with danger, but they've never got it wrong. So
yeah, well, you want to get that right because they don't mess around. Crocodiles don't mess around for sure.
And
they
outside
don't
of
discriminate.
that, we can't go in any bit of water. I mean, that's the crocodiles. We live with them. They're easy to live with. They live in the water. We live on land. It's dead easy.
But that happens, just to be clear, at the end of the wet season would last your summer months, and then so this happens toward the end of the wet season as the water's receding or less rainfall and such is happening.
Yeah, the wet season sort of starts around October, and then by December we get our first monsoons where we get big rain. 5 days of just blanket rain. And by around April, that's done. The wet season's done, and then we won't see rain again until October again that next year. So the wet season, there's water everywhere. The dry season, everything shrinks up, and the crocodiles then all get pushed into smaller and smaller bits of water. So by the time the tourists get up into the north, there are hundreds of crocodiles in each of these little, billabongs and bodies of water. There are crocodiles everywhere. It's sort of got to see it to believe it.
Yeah, and when you say wet season, I mean you see the posts. If you drive someplace in the dry season, you across a little road or a back country road or something where there might be a trickle in the dry season. You see these posts that say 2 meters, 3 meters, and the water rises like crazy during the wet season, right? We're talking meters of difference in depth of water, even in the wet
there's
area.
a river I cross all the time to get into Arnhem Land, the East Alligator River. And in the dry season, you can cross it pretty easy. There is big tidal movement on that river, even we have massive tides. But on low tide, you cross it no worries. And so many cars get washed off doing silly things. But I always get comments, people saying, why don't you build a bridge? And you have to explain to them, in the wet season, the water is 7 meters higher. And it's not just high in that river. It floods for 100 kilometers. Like, you can't build a 100-kilometer bridge for a couple of hundred people to use. It's just completely impassable. That you kind of have to see it to believe it, how much rain falls out of the sky in that short period.
Right, and that changes everything, changes the landscape. But it's also responsible for, like in Kakadu, I told you I did the yellow water cruise, which is a pretty normal thing people do on a tour. You pull up, when I pulled up, they said straight into I think I was there in November, December, so it was a bit wet. But they said straight onto the walking path where they have like chain link fences on the side, so I guess to keep you from getting eaten. But they said, we had some rain last night. There was a 14-foot crocodile in the parking lot here where we're going to park the bus. So just be, aware. I mean, they clear it. Obviously, they're not going to make any mistakes. But you get on and you go for this beautiful cruise up and down the Billabong, the bird life, everything. The colors are spectacular, and I guess that's because of all the rain and everything you get. I mean, it's the perfect place for all these things to grow. It started to rain slightly, sprinkle. And the guide said, oh, it's perfect. There's going to be crocodiles come to the surface. They come out when it's raining. They were everywhere. I mean, everywhere. There's whatever the stat is, 1 every 10 or whatever meters in the water in that area, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's the crazy thing is you went there in the wet season, so there's water everywhere. You could do that cruise and see 1 or 2 crocs and you go, not many crocs. But as you say, that bit of rain, when it's hot and you get that rain, all the crocs take the opportunity to get out of the water, and they love to spend a bit of time on land if they can. And all of a sudden, there are just hundreds of crocodiles. You think, where were they all hiding? And that's the frightening thing, is that these ancient, massive predators, more than capable of eating people, are completely invisible in knee-deep water. So,
yeah, the guy said, they do the safety spiel. This is where the life preserver is if something happens to the boat, etc. And this is 2 minutes later telling us that there's a croc every 10 meters. And I remember just kind of under my breath saying, so what's the use of the life preserver. And he said, yeah, mate, just, if you go in the water, throw the life preserver in one direction and swim like hell in the other and get out of there. And I said, that's what I thought. The safety spiel was just a spiel, let's say.
Yeah, government regulation, but it's you imagine sitting there. I mean, crocodiles see in full color, so you got this bright yellow or bright orange,
Okay,
slowing you down as you're trying to cumbersomly get through the nut. Throw it one way, swim as fast as you can, get out of there. Don't mess around.
So what is the life like there? I mean, we're saying it's clearly dangerous, but people live in this area. These are people that have been on the land for tens of thousands of years, as you said. But how are people living kind of in harmony with the land, with those, say, threats around? Because there's snakes, there's whatever else,
Yeah, Australia's home to the most of the top 10 most venomous snakes in the world. Mm-hmm. The north is full of crocodiles. You go out into the ocean, you've got box jellyfish that can kill you. There are all of these things that can absolutely kill you, but it becomes this perception. Everything sounds really dangerous when you're living out in the bush there. The crocodiles live in the water, so you avoid the water. Snakes, I've worked with snakes all around the world. I've worked with venomous snakes all over. And every time you see a snake, if you're scared, you'll have this fearful interaction. But if you just stop and watch a snake, he'll look at you and just go the other way, So it's very unlikely. We have maybe 1 or 2 snake fatalities a year in the whole of Australia. We have about 1 crocodile fatality a year in the whole of Australia. So you go to somewhere like India, for example, they have 40,000 people a year die of snake bite alone. They have
40,000?
40,000, yeah. That's recorded.
Oh my gosh.
In the US, there's bear attacks. There's way more animals killing people than in Australia, but we've got this perception because we have all these animals that can kill you.
Right.
When you get out in the bush, the reality is it's not quite as dangerous as you think, which is good. Otherwise, maybe you could have lived there, but it's just knowing the bush and knowing, if the crocodiles are in the water there, let's stay away from the water. And there's a death adder. Let's not step on the death adder. Like it's
that one got me. The death adder not got me obviously, but we did this extended walk, which was fortunate to have the small group. I think it was an 8K walk, and I can't remember the name. I think I told you previously, but you had said it's. Yeah, not everyone gets to go to this place. And there were some puddles and stuff because it had rained. But they said, there are crocodiles in the area, but they're freshies, freshwater crocodiles, which is smaller, totally different beast than a saltwater crocodile for people who don't understand. But I remember the guide saying, just be careful in this area because death adders, the snakes, this sort of dry leaves, they just can sit there right in this kind of setting. So just be careful. And then he starts telling stories about a guy who got bit and then stayed still through the night and didn't let the poison get throughout his body and then walked out the next day. And I said, well, what would happen if someone gets bit? And he said, I'll run to the truck and get the sat phone and call for help, which was, 5K away. I remember thinking what the hell is the sat phone doing in the truck? Yeah.
That is pretty wild. Always take a sat phone or some sort of, you are so far away from mobile coverage. You're so far away from help. It's the only chance you've got is get on the sat phone. We're lucky in Australia. We've got this phenomenal flying doctors that will come out in a helicopter, hover down over somewhere, drop a couple of people out and pick you up. We can be a long way from help, but still not as far as you would be without
someone having to run
healthcare system and everything that someone comes helps you out.
Yeah. So tell me a bit about your day-to-day in the job, because you do a lot really cool kind of selfie stuff on your Instagram where you're telling people, explaining, even eating things out there. You can find this, you can cook this. You're cooking things on the beach. It seems exotic to people, but this is, I guess, is just acquired. You said 16 years acquired knowledge of this is something you can find out here and eat. And you learn that from the local people. How have you acquired all that knowledge?
Yeah, places like Arnhem Land, you're going back in time to what the world was like before we populated to the point where there's not as much fish anymore. There's not as much whatever. So it's just an abundance of food. There's so much food around. And spending that 16 years really closely, mostly with the old people, with the old women in particular for plant food, the women hold this phenomenal botanical knowledge, ethnobotany stuff of what plants you can and can't eat and how you prepare certain things. Some plants are toxic unless prepared a certain way. There's just really unbelievable, thousands of generations of accumulative knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got all the protein. So, you just go down the mangroves and you pull out these huge big mud mussels, and you chop open a bit of rotten mangrove and grab these big mangrove worms and things that look real wild. And people go, oh, how could you eat that?
Right.
It's like anything. It's an acquired taste. Who ate an oyster for the first time,
Yeah.
It's there really is food everywhere. And it's, for me, day to day, getting out there, having the chefing background as well, being able to eat wild food is just extraordinary. Spear a mud crab, cook it on the fire, shuck a dozen oysters off the rocks, and then, go in the bush and have a big juicy bush apple. You think this is the way we all used to live. It's amazing to be able to tap into that knowledge.
Yeah, nothing processed, and it's real stuff, real food right from the vine or the ground or anywhere. What about the day-to-day of the job? If people come out and do a tour with you, and what do they learn? Why do they go? I felt, it's maybe sounds cheesy as a tourist to say, but when I left there, I was like, I'm really, really glad I did this. It blew my mind. Seeing the reef, the Great Barrier Reef, had a similar effect. I remember thinking, like, the colors are just nothing I've ever seen before in my life. And I'd say adventurous. I like to get outdoors, spend a lot of time in the outdoors. Northern Territory was just a different beast altogether. And people say it can change you, I guess, after you see it. Have you seen that with visitors, the effect it has on them?
Absolutely. And even for myself, like I've traveled around the world. I've been to some of the wildest pockets of the world. And I've really struggled to come across anywhere quite so wild as the Northern Territory. There's just endless expanses of wild bush with hardly a person. And the abundance of Northern Australia, we're always having people come away saying, wow, we didn't know what we expected, but this is blown away what we expected. Like a day on tour, for example, we'll get up in the morning, we'll cross a river in, a couple of inches of water, but either side of the car has got 30 crocodiles, and you're going, wow, this is just, driving down the track, we pick up an Aboriginal guide, they show us 30,000-year-old rock art in a rock art site that also has 50-year-old rock art. You got Aboriginal people that have the longest continuation of cultural knowledge and art in the world. And you've got these people sharing this knowledge and language, and you turn around and you're in this phenomenal ancient rock art escarpment area with these endless floodplains, and there really is just no way quite like this. It's breathtaking, and it also has this spiritual feeling. Like, I'm not a terribly spiritual person myself, but you can feel it. I think being surrounded by so much really wild nature, it just gets under your skin. There's just something about it.
Yeah, and not to mention the fact that you're away from everything else, right? You're away
No
from
distractions.
the hustle and bustle. Sorry?
Yeah. No distractions. It's just us and bush. And I mean, it's what keeps me coming back. I've worked for the same company now for coming up to 16 years, as I said, and I couldn't do that if it was the same tour every day. But every single week, I'm seeing things I've never seen before.
Okay.
Around every bend is a new adventure, and there's really not many places you can get that. It's just an addictive lifestyle, and getting to share that with people from around the world, privilege of a lifetime, without a doubt.
The interesting thing is, I guess when you think about it, there's a bit of something for everyone, because I don't know much about art, and I'm terrible at it. Written words have always been my thing. So even, I go to a museum or something, and I try to wrap my head around how this was done. And this is something that's 600 years old, let alone thousands and thousands of years old. But you have art, the wildness of the reptiles, everything that you can encounter, the climate, the flowers, the birds, whatever. There's kind of something for everybody in that part of the world if you just get yourself there. And there's a feeling too that you're far away from everything, like detached kind of from a lot of things in the real world, in a way.
Yeah, I mean, you really are. And as you said, there is something for everyone, because you can do it on a small scale as a backpacker on a budget, where you hop on a 4-wheel drive bus with a young tour guide, and he'll take you right out of the bush, and for next to no money, you've had this real wild experience. Mm-hmm. On the other end of the scale, you can do tours like with us, where they're only small groups, but it's a much more high-end product. And we've set up this luxury lodge 8 hours away from the nearest point of civilization. It's very much like African safari camps.
Okay.
So there's something for everyone. You can do it comfortably, but still be in those really wild places. But you can do it with a few of the creature comforts.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you too about Cahill's Crossing is something that pops up on a lot of social media. This is Arnhem Land, just to be specific. It's a road that would be well underwater in the wet season, I guess. But the videos you can see on your social media, other places, the crocs just line up because I guess the fish, barramundi is it? That's the big thing to fish in the fresh and brackish water there. Kind of swim over the little channel or the road, etc. And the crocs wait to eat the fish. But the things people do driving across this little, I mean, it's couple hundred meters maybe across. They just drive across when they definitely shouldn't at certain tides. And it's amazing that, I don't want to say dumb, but it's kind of dumb what people do. And it's totally safe if you do it not when the water's rushing, correct?
Yeah, so there's no one else like it. Cahill's Crossing, every day of the week, there's something to see there. So as you said, in the wet season, there's heaps of fresh water pushing down. It's flooded right up. It's impassable. It's completely shut. Can't get anywhere near it. But once it drops, although you're 80 kilometres from the coast, it's a long way from the coast, we have 8-metre tides. So I don't know how to do the conversion into...
No, it's 25 feet or something, yeah.
It's massive tides, like some of the biggest tides.
80K away from the coast.
80 kilometres away, because we have 8-metre tides, so you get over a metre of water pushing upstream at high tide. So you can get washed upstream because of the amount of water pushing upstream with the tide. And that's what the crocodiles are waiting for. You've got this causeway where you've got all these rocks piled up to sort of, they put in the concrete road. And as the water hits that point and floods over, the diamond scale mullet, these big fatty fish, and barramundi, as you said, they all push upstream, and the crocodiles line up. They put their little fingers out the water, and they use those sensory organs. They can pick up really minute vibrations. So even in that dirty water, they can feel the fish when they're close enough, and bang, they spin their head and eat them. So you've got 50 crocs all eating fish, and at the same time, all this water, make more than enough water to push you off. And someone will rock up in a car and look at that and go, we'll give it a crack, and head across.
It's insane.
And I mean, this year, I cross it all the time, and I've crossed it in some pretty hairy situations, but you need to know what you're doing. And every year, people get washed off that crossing. And it's just a simple matter of just wait a while. Wait till the tide turns, goes out, and then, maybe you have to wait an hour. But the upside is you won't get eaten by crocodiles.
Right, yeah. To do it just to risk the water would be one thing, but then the crocodile sitting there like ratchets it up to another level altogether of risk. It's crazy to me to see.
You just shake your head. And I put up another video this year of a family there fishing, and you've got this tiny little kid, like probably 5 or 6 years old, and mum's just letting this kid climb over the rocks a couple of inches away from the edge of the water, and you've got this muddy water. She can see 50 big crocs, Crocodiles will take those opportunities, and a little child like that, it's such an easy target. There's signs everywhere. There's even signs warning of recent fatalities. There's been 2 fatalities at that crossing. In 1987, famously, a fella had his head bitten off in front of a bus of tourists.
Wow.
So, it's not like they don't know. It's just, I don't know what it is, but people just take these crazy risks.
Yeah, do you think are they locals or they're just tourists from overseas and they don't quite understand? Like crocodiles, I guess we can get into this a bit. I didn't want to spend all the time on crocodiles, but it's quite fascinating because people think, in the U.S., when I've told them about trips to these areas, they say, it's like an alligator. And I said, no, not quite. Crocodile is like a dinosaur, just like a Tyrannosaurus Rex in the water. They want to eat basically anything they can get to.
They're 2 different animals.
Yeah, 2 different. And when I went to lunch, I remember there's a river near where we were having an outdoor lunch and take every group there. And the guy said before we got off the bus, we are not the highest thing on the food chain out here, no longer. So stay back from the water. You don't get that speech on many tours, but you clock it unless you're foolish.
No. I mean, I've worked a lot with crocodiles in captivity and in the wild, and you see what they're capable of. But I've also worked with American alligators in captivity. And they're you jump in a pen with 6 alligators, big alligators, and you walk up to them and you give them a pat on the tail and you go, hey, mate, they can still bite you. You still got to be careful. But it's like working with a cat and then working with a lion. They're 2 different things. Estuarine crocodiles are crazy. You get in a pen with them, they're charging into the water. They're territorial.
Yep.
They're eating much larger game, and where they can take down full-grown buffalo. So we're well and truly in that range of food size. Crocodiles are a whole different game.
Even in Darwin, so you're in the big city up there, and no one goes to the beach. I mean, it was hot as hell when I was there, humid, and people go and watch the sunset. It's beautiful, and no one goes near the beach. So,
yeah. Saltwater crocodiles, or another name we call them, estuarine crocodiles, they're found from northern Australia up to southern India. So it's quite a big distribution. In most of their range, there's not many. Northern Australia is the last stronghold. But they're quite happy to live their whole life up in freshwater. But every beach will have crocodiles in northern Australia. They utilise those saltwater areas, and they'll eat sea turtles, they'll eat mud crabs. They need a bit of access to brackish or salt water often to go and breed. But there's Darwin Harbour alone. So Darwin Harbour is part of the crocodile management zone, and they remove over 200 crocodiles a year out of that one harbour. So, you try to reduce the risk of crocodile attack around where there's so many people. But as you said, while you were there, you've got box jellyfish, the most venomous creature in the world. You go for a swim and you get tentacles wrapped around you, you can be dead in half an hour. So we look at beaches differently. We enjoy the sunset. We walk along the beach. You just stay out of the water.
Your tour group would love this. Most venomous. We're talking about crocodiles, most venomous creature in the world. But please come out and join us. But like you said, as long as you're smart, you don't put yourself in any danger.
It's funny. Whenever we get up to our coastal camp, so we're in paradise. We've been driving through the bush for 5 hours or whatever. Bumpy dirt roads in the middle of nowhere, and you hit the coast, and all of a sudden you see these pristine beaches, azure blue water. You can't imagine how beautiful it is. And every time, without fail, the guests say, "What a shame we can't swim here. What a shame there's the crocodiles." And I say the same thing every time. I said, if you want to go somewhere where there used to be crocodiles and they killed them all so you can swim, go to Bali, go to Thailand. And they go, "Oh, there's too many people." I go, "That's exactly right. That's why you come here, because of the crocodiles, because they keep it wild. There's not many places left in the world where us humans have to think about what we do and go, okay, the water out in the beach isn't for us. That's for the crocodiles. So it makes it unique. It's why people come and see somewhere truly wild.
I guess I should ask you then, given your life and profession, any close calls, any wild stories? You've worked, you said, with snakes. You've traveled to work with snakes, but you must get it a lot. Ever been in any danger with a crocodile or et cetera, or got surprised? Because as careful as you can be, you're still up close and personal with this stuff. You're not in a zoo. This is the real deal.
Yeah. We were sleeping in a really small boat one night. We'd been fishing, taking a boat back from the coastal camp out in Arnhem Land to Darwin, 5 days via the coast, and we're pulling into these little creeks. Unbelievable fishing for barramundi, but we're asleep there, really rough, stinking hot. And 3 a.m, we just feel the head and the teeth of this crocodile scraping the bottom of the boat. This thing's trying to put big holes in the boat and sink us. And it was high tide, so with those big tides, there is no land. We're up in the mangroves. The water's flooded through this impenetrable maze of mangroves. If this crocodile sinks us and puts us in the water, we're done. So we're shining a spotlight on the water. Heart rate's going through the roof, and I've got a spear. Eventually, the crocodile pops up, and I've just thrown the spear, hit the crocodile in the head. It would have done next to no damage to the croc, but enough for that crocodile to go, okay, maybe this isn't worth worrying about. And then finally, when we got back into town, we looked at the bottom of the boat, and sure enough, it was pretty close. There was these big scrape marks. Crocodiles have 3.6 ton of jaw pressure. That's the most any animal has ever had, more than dinosaurs. So, these things can crush a big, thick aluminum hull like nothing. Put holes in it, and you'd be sunk. That's just one of many, many stories, because I've also done crocodile egg collecting. There's a farming industry in Darwin for crocodiles. In the 70s, when we protected crocs, we decided to also farm them so that, no one would have to hunt wild crocs anymore. It's been really successful conservation through commerce. But we go out in the wild, there's a quota of eggs we can collect from the wild. And you're flying around in helicopters, you get dropped out of the helicopter, you're walking through the swamps. All you've got to protect you is a bamboo pole, and you're coming into these crocodile nests, these big mounds of organic matter. They'll have a big wallow dug next to it, and the female, she might be 3 meters, 3.5 meters. She doesn't get as big as the male, but she's big croc, more than big enough to kill and eat you. And you've got to protect the guy while he's carefully getting all the eggs out of the nest. And we pick up the eggs. You've got to pay attention because you've got to mark the top and put them in the crate the same way they were laid. Otherwise, the yolk crushes the embryo. So this guy's getting through the nest, getting 120 eggs out, or 60 eggs, however many she's had. And I'm there on a pole. This big female croc's coming out trying to kill us, and I'm just keeping her away with a bamboo pole.
Wow.
It was the most wild job I've ever done. You got paid hardly anything for it, but it was just such a wild experience. And every day is a close call when we're doing that. It's always a storm.
Yeah. Wow. So in hindsight, like the sleeping on the boat, is that something you would do again, or was that you just
absolutely.
get really unlucky for?
We were unlucky. Yeah, we were a bit unlucky, and we had something there. Yeah, lucky and unlucky. It was October, so it was that time of the year where crocodiles are starting to mate up. Big dominant males are becoming territorial, and us snoring away on the hull of a boat after a few too many beers,
right,
would have sounded like something worth investigating. So, but you do that sort of stuff all the time up here. It's just it's a wild place, as I said.
Okay, well, so before I let you go, I want to let a kid ask a question. You're the type of guy, I'm sure if you showed up at a school, they would go crazy. I don't know if you've ever done that, but the questions must be hilarious. So I have a question here from Magda.
Hi, David. My name's Magda, and I have a question for you. What's your favorite animal in Australia?
It's a tough question. I try not to play favourites. At the moment, we're looking after some fruit bats. So we're talking about these giant bats with a wingspan of about, 60, 70 centimetres, really big. And we're looking after orphan babies that have tried to fly away too soon and fall and ended up on the ground, and that die. So at the moment, I've got to say, black fruit bats are my favourite, but it changes all the time. I love snakes. I've always been drawn to these venomous and dangerous things. So snakes and crocodiles are things that people find unlovable. I've always been drawn to. So,
how do you get comfortable around snakes? Because most people freak out.
I just have this memory of being a young fella, and I was up on a water tank and saw this big eastern brown, in the top 2 deadliest snakes in the world, most venomous snakes in the world. And I was safe, and I got to see this big venomous snake do its thing, and in a situation where I was safe, and I remember it just flipped this switch in my head. I was fascinated with snakes, and from then, that's all I would think about. I'd go in the bush and find snakes. Over time, you watch them, you get comfortable. And then it slowly progresses into doing silly things. And I was in a kid's playground at about 18 years old, and there's this big eastern brown. And so people are trying to kill the snake. If it bites a kid, the kid's dead. So I've caught this snake, and having never caught a venomous snake in my life, walked it through the main street of this town and released it into the bush. And from that moment on, I was sort of hooked. I was like, well, I could have a real impact here. I can help save the snake, help save people. Since then, I've travelled the world. I was on a research project in southern India, in the Western Ghats, where we were catching and tracking king cobra, the biggest venomous snakes in the world. We're talking 20-foot venomous snakes, really big, really, really big.
20 feet.
The ones we had a 10-foot and a 12-foot, but they get up to sort of 18. Really, really big. It's a whole nother game. They can stand up, they put their hood out, and they look you straight in the eye. And it was just amazing to spend every day in the forests of the Western Ghats following the biggest venomous snakes in the world as they hunt other snakes.
Okay.
This love for snakes has certainly led me down a path of some extraordinary experiences. I recommend it. Get into snakes.
Get into snakes. You have to be comfortable with that where you are, I guess, because I'll tell you, the day the guy said, yeah, just be careful here because death adders can hang out. I was like thinking, I wrote it in my book, I think I positioned myself about 4th in the group, in the line of people, because they say like sometimes they miss the first one, but they get the second guy. And I was like, well, 4th is good. There's about 10 people here, maybe 4th or 5th. Someone's going to stir it up. But you start, even when I'm out, I've been out in California and places and seen rattlesnakes or on my mountain bike. And man, the rest of the ride, it's hard to get that out of your mind that you're just going to ride up on one or step on one or whatever.
Rattlesnakes are amazing. I was in California. I was catching rattlesnakes with a venom researcher, and I'd never seen rattlesnakes. I was so excited. But what a friendly snake. You got a snake that lets you know if you're too close. You're walking through the bush and you hear this. And you go, oh, hey, mate, sorry, I didn't see you there. He's just giving you a warning. So, you walk away. I thought, oh, what a lovely, friendly snake. Ours don't give you the warnings. So
It's a good way to
But I
look
walk
at it.
everywhere barefoot. That's the other thing. I'm that comfortable in the bush that I
Barefoot.
haven't worn shoes in the bush in memory, and yeah. So I mean, potentially that's more dangerous because you're not wearing socks or gaiters
Yeah,
or
boots and yeah.
and boots or anything like that. But yeah, you just every time I come across a snake, which is fairly common, I just stand still. It looks at me, I look at it, make sure it knows I'm no threat, and they go about their
Mhm.
business. It's not. It's one of those perceived threats, I suppose.
It's really cool the career you've made. I mean, just acquiring all this knowledge. You've gone off to learn abroad and come back. What's the goal? You want to keep doing what you're doing? I can tell the passion you have in your voice for this stuff, and you really care for the creatures and the places you go to. I would imagine the Aboriginal culture, they protect who they let in some ways. You have to earn their trust. You want to keep doing that and keep doing what you've been doing and learn more? What's the goal?
It's an extremely addictive lifestyle. You know, having the opportunity to spend so much time with Aboriginal people, and as you said, I've been adopted into that kinship system, the most complicated kinship system in the world. You know, we're touring between the top of Western Australia all the way through the northern. It's such a vast area of land. It's pretty addictive. But I'm hoping to in the future get into a bit of naturalist cruise ships. There's these small cruise ships that take guests to the most remote pockets of the world, and they have a few guides on board that are naturalists and guest speakers. So when they go and visit, you know, remote tribes in Papua New Guinea, or they go up to Madagascar, all these little places. Yeah, I'd like to expand some of the wild places I travel, and these really small naturalist cruises. I think they're an option for the future, but still keep doing this. It's too attractive lifestyle. Like once it gets under your skin, you can't go back
Yeah.
to a normal boring life.
Well, it's a long way from a chef's kitchen, that's for sure. That's incredible. I didn't
Yeah.
realize that was your start.
It feels like another life. It really does. It feels like I've lived two separate lives. And I mean, I
Right.
use those chef skills all the time. So that's great. You know, I'm cooking a lot on tour. So I'm very glad I did that because it was an extraordinary experience working in those sort of kitchens. But yeah, if I spend a few days outside of the bush, I'm just pining for it. You know, I need to get
Okay.
back in there and be surrounded by trees.
The last question, I guess, is then a bit of advice, travel advice. If people go to Australia and they go, yep, I went to Sydney, and I said, oh, you didn't go to Melbourne? I lived in Melbourne. It's amazing. And I felt like, and I wrote this in my book, that people go to all the touristy stuff. They see Sydney, they get wowed because it's a fantastic place and you can absorb it all really quickly, all the things you've seen on TV. Melbourne, you spend a little more time. Adelaide, even, really cool sort of country town, as they say. But you have to make an effort to get to places like where you go, right? It takes a little more to fly to Darwin, to then get out, take some time, see the place. What would be your recommendation, and why should they come visit you?
So, I mean, yeah, most people, as you said, they fly into places like Sydney, and Sydney's a beautiful city. And it's got its charm, it's unique, but a city's a city. You go everywhere in the world, they're all a bit different, but there's lots of similarities. You come up somewhere like Darwin, you've got this small frontier town in the top of Northern Australia with this vibrant multicultural culture, these phenomenal market scenes, so much great food. You can't throw a rock without hitting something delicious to eat. And to have that as your base and then be able to go out to places like Kakadu National Park, these extraordinary landscapes, and meet the oldest living culture in the world, see this rock art that's, you know, you don't have to be interested in art to look at these phenomenal big paintings and say, you know, 35,000 years ago, someone painted that on a rock. And imagine 35,000 years ago, you know, when the rock art was painted, our ancestors hadn't even arrived in Europe yet. So, like, it's just the time scale. You're looking at rocks that are 1.65 billion years old, almost half the age of the planet. You know, it's just a vast landscape of dizzying numbers. Really, it's definitely worth seeing for someone who wants a different experience, and go home and tell their friends they went somewhere really different.
Yeah, and we didn't even get into Darwin. I mean, Darwin has its own unique history. There's some World War II history, even the cyclone. I was going to say hurricane that blew through. Was that in the 70s, 60s?
1974,
But
Cyclone Tracy,
74,
a couple
like,
hundred people died.
yeah.
And then the bombing of Darwin, that's the big one. I mean, certainly for Americans, the same fleet that bombed Pearl Harbor flew onto Darwin, bombed
Right.
Darwin Harbor, sunk more ships in Darwin Harbor than Pearl Harbor. and they dropped more bombs on Darwin Harbour than Pearl Harbor. Over 60 consecutive bombing raids. So it's, you know, it's phenomenal wartime history, and it's a resilient town. It's been knocked down several times, completely flattened by the bombing of Darwin, Cyclone Tracy, and even before that there were several cyclones that wiped the town out. But it's this thriving little city right up the top of northern Australia with its own unique culture. There's nowhere else like it.
I agree with you. Of all the experiences, and I was fortunate to have a lot of them in Australia, that was a unique thing to see. And there's so much more too. When you look at the map, it only scratched the surface. It went 3 hours in this direction, 2 hours in this direction, but so much more to see. So I appreciate you sharing the stories. It's really cool, and I would encourage people to follow you online. Maybe you can share your Instagram is what?
Yeah, David McMahon Australia on Instagram, TikTok. I just like to share a bit of the knowledge I've been lucky enough to accumulate, and people seem to enjoy it. So follow along and get up to Northern Australia. Come out with Venture North Safaris. I'd love to take anyone out bush. The more the merrier. It's fantastic to be able to share this stuff with everyone.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Thank you. I appreciate the time. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
Okay, a massive thank you to David McMahon. I told you that guy had some stories, and man, he knows how to tell them. So I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed talking with him, and if I go back to the Northern Territory, definitely going to link up with him because I think he'd be an amazing guide for that company he works for. They're called Venture North Safaris. So check them out online if you are ever thinking about going there, and you should. It's a unique and special place. If you want to hear my stories from the Northern Territory, you can find them in my book, Yanked Down Under, A Drink and a Look Around Australia. That's available on Amazon and elsewhere online where books are sold, or on my website. You can go to twinthievemedia.com, and there's a tab there for the book and for this podcast. So check it out. What a experience I had there. Some funny things happened to me. Funny people in the group. At one point, a guy put his arms over the boat to take a picture, and I had to tap him on the shoulder and remind him that a crocodile could rip his arms off his shoulder at any moment. So luckily that did not happen. That would have changed the title of the book considerably. All right. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. Please subscribe to the podcast, share it with friends. Maybe someone you know is going to Australia or has always wanted to, and David's got the stories to pull them in and hold their attention, I think. Thank you for listening. We'll be back with another episode real soon.